I think we can start. Well, members of the Turkish Contractors Association, I welcome you all to this video conference on behalf of myself and the Turkish Contractors Association. Today we have distinguished experts from Asian Development Bank, and we will discuss the business opportunities targeting the Turkish construction and consultancy companies with the Asian Development Bank. And after I stop, I will offer the floor to our president as his welcoming remarks, followed by the presentations from individual experts by topics from the Asian Development Bank. And then we will have as usual, the Q&A session. At the Q&A session, you can either write your questions on the Q&A, pressing by Q&A button, or raise your hands or finger just to pose your question directly to the person you would like to ask. So I stop here and offer the floor to Mr. Eren, the president of the Turkish Contractor Association, for his welcome remarks. Mr. Eren.
Thank you, Mr. Yalçın. Good morning, everybody. Distinguished Director, Mr. Rüstem Abdülkayyumov, distinguished representatives of the Asian Development Bank, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am very much pleased to host and welcome you all to this video conference on behalf of the Turkish Contractors Association. With this opportunity, I would also like to thank the representatives of the bank for their cooperation in making this video conference possible for us. As you would recall, we also had a video conference on 28 September 2021 and had very useful information on ADB's activities, strategy, and contribution to developing Asia in transports, energy, and healthcare sectors, and ADB's procurement processes and systems. Today, we will go some deeper. The ADB representatives will elaborate on ADB's business opportunities in the transport and energy sectors, as well as the support for PPP projects. Today, our audience is the member of the Turkish Contractors Association and the members of the sister organization, the Association of Turkish Consulting Engineers and Architects. The sectors we will focus on today are the ones the Turkish construction companies mainly operate. Therefore, I am sure that the information provided today will attract both our member companies and consultants and encourage them to participate in more ADB financed tenders. As you know, the Turkish construction companies are also investors in various fields, ranging from the manufacturing of construction materials to energy, tourism, health, and transportation. In recent years, the Turkish contractors have gained considerable experience in various financing schemes, such as public-private partnership and field operate transfer projects. Up to the present, Turkish construction companies undertook nearly 12,000 projects in 131 countries with a business volume of $461 billion. Last but not least, I would like to express that the world is passing through the hard times. We have barely overcome with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now we are witnessing the Russia-Ukraine war, a humanitarian tragedy in this century, with all its destructive impacts on the global economy. However, we are optimistic and ready to work much harder. We also know that despite these challenges, the developing countries need investments for infrastructure to preserve and protect the well-being of their citizens. I hope that today's video conference will strengthen our existing cooperation with the ADB and our members, get the support they need from the bank in Asia, and bring added value to the immense project backlog of the region. Now I would like to offer the floor to Mr. Rüstem Abdülkayyumov for his statement, followed by the other representatives of the Asian Development Bank for their presentations. Thank you for your kind attention and participation.
Thank you, Mr. Eren. And first of all, I would like to say good morning to all our
Sound.
participants, and it's really my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual business opportunity seminar. I am glad that we have strong cooperation with the TCA, and we already had similar events in the past, as Mr. Ren mentioned. And I would like to thank our friends from the host organization, Turkish Contractors Association, for helping us in organizing this event. And I would also like to express my thanks to you, Mr. Ren, for your opening remarks and support. Maybe I'll start with the history a little bit. Those of you who had prior experience working with ADB, you remember that we used to have so-called business opportunities fair in Manila. That was quite a big event. Many participants from different countries used to come to ADB and establish network with ADB staff. And last event we had in 2019 was attended by more than 1,000 participants. For the last couple of years, we could not host this kind of event because of the pandemics, but now since many restrictions are being lifted and travel is possible, we hope soon we will be able to organize such in-person business opportunity seminars, or maybe the bigger business opportunity fair, either in Manila or maybe in one of our developing member countries. We are currently exploring different options, and once we have firmed the place and the timing of this event, we will post this information on ADB website. So for all those who are interested, you may go to ADB website, which is adb.org, then click on Work with Us tab, and then select ADB Business Opportunities Outreach page. On that page, we will have information about the next big event, but that will be sometimes next year. And as Mr. Ren indicated, today we have representatives from contractors and consultants, engineering firms who are all interested to work with ADB. And normally we have a lot of consultants and engineering firms engaged in the project design, but of course contractors and also some engineering firms are engaged in the project implementation. Turkish contractors are traditionally very active in ADB projects, and we are very glad to see many of them participating today. Just maybe we'll share some figures on ADB portfolio, which is currently stands at about 118 billion US dollars. So this is the total value of all ongoing projects that ADB finances. That includes 104 billion of sovereign operations, which are loans under government guarantees, and also about 14 billion of non-sovereign operations, where probably there is also interest from Turkish contractors, because that is done by our private sector operations department. They do their own assessment of clients, and they provide loans to those whom they believe they can basically implement projects. Today, we will be covering quite interesting and important sectors. First, of course, is transport and energy. These are traditionally the largest sectors in ADB portfolio. Transport occupies 25% of total portfolio. Energy is, I think, about 21-22%. And these sectors are quite diverse, because they have many subsectors. Like in transport, it's roads, railways, seaports, airports. And then in energy, it is power generation, transmission, distribution. A lot of emphasis is lately on the renewable energy, on smart grids, smart metering, and so on. And of course, there are many opportunities in these sectors for contractors and consultants. What I wanted to share with you that is lately we see that the borrowers are preparing more and more complex projects. And of course, there is an increasing demand for good civil work contractors, those who have experience in EPC contracts, turnkey contracts, those who have experience in design and build contracts, then also in the DBO contracts, where there's design, build, and operate. This is because many borrowers prefer engage contractors on a single responsibility basis, so that they prepare design and also do the civil works. And probably many of you know that there are many also opportunities for consultants. And these are basically under two windows. One is under loans and grants, which are managed by ADB borrowers under sovereign operations. And borrowers are responsible for recruiting consultants. Last year, ADB borrowers spent about 700 million in recruiting consultants. In addition to that, ADB also recruits consultants by itself. We have TA resources, we have other resources, and we have spent about $200 million for consulting services that are administered by ADB. And that means ADB does recruitment of consultants and then manages these contracts. So on average, every year we finance about 250 contracts with firms and around 3,000 contracts with the individual consultants. All these opportunities are advertised on ADB website, and we noted that many large contractors, they have offices in many ADB member countries, and they monitor these opportunities very closely, either on ADB website or on the local mass media. But for consulting industry, probably the picture is slightly different because the number of consulting firms is much, much larger. And not all of them may afford having offices in all the countries where they want to work. So therefore, I think today we will share some information on how to find such business opportunities on ADB website. And of course, you could expand it further and look not only at ADB website, but also coordinate with our resident missions, our field offices, which are placed in many different countries. And what I wanted to share with you also, that traditionally, when it comes to civil works, many contractors, they prefer to associate with other contractors in the form of a joint venture or have a subcontractors when they're bidding for large contracts because they want to improve their capacity and increase their chances to win. This was always the case for complex contracts that the ADB finances. Very often the joint venture comprises of 2, 3, and sometimes even 5 members. Very common industry practice in construction. But we see similar trend in consulting market. As I said, projects become more complex, and there are more complex technical requirements needed from consultants. And therefore, and such requirements could be, detailed engineering design, which traditionally was the borrower's responsibility. But as I said, there is more kind of shifts towards a single responsibility basis where contractors and consultants have to do engineering design. Different types of field surveys. Then computer modeling is becoming very kind of popular on different aspects. Not only in the design, but also on different forecasts. And of course, procurement and construction supervision. So therefore, because assignments become more complex, in consulting, we also see more associations among the consulting firms. Even the firms which are very large and used to bid as a single entities, now they try to associate with some other companies to increase their chances to win. So these kind of arrangements, first of all, of course, help larger companies to win, but also it's a window for smaller companies who probably may not have prior experience with ADB, but they may gain that experience if they cooperate with the larger firms and submit the joint bid, and if they win contracts. So probably this is one of the tips we can share with you on how to bid for ADB projects and try to win contracts. Right? Also, I wanted to maybe share with you that, of course, we provide opportunities for consultants and contractors to bid under ADB projects, but also because of the very rapidly changing environment where there are a lot of innovations in the market, we are looking for parties, for consultants and contractors who can share their innovative ideas, which we could use in the project design and implementation. We are very much interested to receive a feedback also from contractors and consultants on how we can improve the project design. So therefore, if you have such ideas, I would welcome you to share it with the ADB colleagues, with me, and with all the other presenters today, because that will provide us an opportunity, again, to assess different maybe innovative approaches that you are using, and then we will try to see how that could be used in designing and implementing ADB projects. So our cooperation continues with all business partners around the globe. We are very pleased that Turkish contractors and consultants are very active. And I hope you will find today's presentation very useful. And I hope it will ultimately help you win contracts under ADB projects. So I will close my welcoming remarks and thank you all for your participation. And now I will hand over to our next speaker, Mr. Bertrand Galou, our Principal Transfer Specialist, for his presentation. Thank you very much.
We thank you.
Thank you, Rustem. Good day to all. Good morning. Very happy to be here with you today. So my name is Bertrand Galou. I'm a Principal Transport Specialist in Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department in ADB, and I'm lead for urban transport and rail activities in the transport sector. I think we have slides that we will put on the screen very soon. Yeah, almost there. So let's just start the presentation. Next slide. And so we're talking about the transport sector. This is how we see and are looking at the transport sector in ADB when supporting our developing member countries and private sector clients. So we are looking at it as low carbon, safe, accessible, and affordable transport system and services. All this together with a sense of efficiency, innovation, resilience, climate, and alignment with international agreement, and sustainability of operation and assets. So that's a very ambitious vision that we have for the sector, but that's what is required these days. And it has been mentioned to you several times already in the introduction. So we are looking at projects that are more and more complex and innovative. And that's what we are going to talk about in our next slide. Next slide, please. Here we see the transport investment by subsector, lending volume and trends. So it has been mentioned to you already. So transport is approximately 1/4 of ADB sovereign lending volume. The share of each subsector is fluctuating depending on the year. This comes from the fact that we are talking about large size projects, and so projects have a huge impact on the share of the said subsector on a given year. All told, we now see road projects down below 50%, and that is international. The intention is to scale up urban transport and railway project. You can also see the trend here in the breakdown of portfolio since the early 90s, with urban transport and rail transport in gray and orange color, again, clearly increasing. Next slide. And here we see that this increase is continued in the near future pipeline. Next slide. So now we are looking at how it all fits in the wider picture. So the overarching targets of ADB Strategy 2030 is to build a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia in the Pacific. And ADB is clearly getting away from pure infrastructure finance and favors more integrated solution with high value addition. We have here the 7 operational priorities of the ADB strategy: poverty reduction, gender, climate change, livable cities, rural development and food security, governance, and regional cooperation and integration. The transport sector may be the only sector contributing to all of the 7 operational priorities. And as you can see here, other than operational priorities, strategy is looking at value addition. through finance, knowledge, and partnership, including with the private sector, of course. And lastly, promoting innovative technologies as well as delivering integrated solutions are strong guiding principles. So again, the main takeaway for you here is certainly on value addition, innovative technologies, and integrated solution. And in case it is a competitive advantage that you have, and from the experience that we can see among the participants today, we already know that the case. So we really invite you to reflect those experience and all the innovative features that you can propose in your proposals and bid, and make sure that it is clearly put forward. Next slide, please. So again, we see in something that you really need to understand, that we see transport as an enabler of development. And this is again how it contributes to the various dimension of the strategy, again with the operational priorities. The other thing I would like to mention is that we are having an increased focus on maintenance and asset management for sustainability, including financial sustainability. I would also underscore the climate agenda and all the international agreements, and when all this is placed in the center of the strategy. I'm sure you've heard many announcements made. It is really central. So the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, and there is clearly an increased commitment and focus on supporting and developing climate-aligned project and resilience infrastructure. That's really a must for all projects. Next slide. So these slides and the next slide will give you an indication of the type of project being supported and implementing by ADB and the upcoming ones. We also have two short videos that we would like to propose, because you will see in a very short period of time all the various dimensions of this project. We're talking about integration and innovations. So before going to the project, I just would like to mention that complete information on all ADB finance project and ADB supported project is available on our website. It has been mentioned by Rustam, but for you, this is really the main source of information. You will find it by country and by project, by country. So you will see the project for approval in the 3-4 years. So that includes the landing and non-landing products. So which mean the project loans as well as the technical assistance. So given a strategy or the country focus that you would like to have, it's important that you find this information, and it's available there. And now by projects, if there are particular subsector or project that are of interest to you, you will find every information on each project on our website, and that includes a procurement strategy and procurement plan with a clear indication of the contract and packages, usually including the contract amount and the procurement method, as well as tentative dates, so that you can prepare. And Rustam mentioned something that is increasing and very important. So if you see that there are projects coming with large contracts, you may anticipate and try to find the right partners to be able to propose the best bid for this important contract. And of course, this work, not just for transport, this information is available for all sectors. So here in the Central West region, so you will see all the subsectors that I mentioned earlier that are covered, including the economic corridor program that we have, the CAREC, that support roads, that support railways as well. And so there is an increased focus, and we'll see that in other regions, on road maintenance and road safety that I forgot to mention earlier. And as you will see, and I mentioned it, there is an increased support to urban transport project. And we are going to the next slide. And this is the first video we would like to show you on the Peshawar bus rapid transit system. The project is now has been commissioned in 2020. I will not say more, and we are going to play the video so that you can see it. So just 2-3 minutes.
हयाताबाद से मैं यहाँ पे जब आता था लोकल ट्रांसपोर्ट में तो कम से कम 1 घंटा 1.5 घंटा लग जाता था। ये जू पेशावर की बसेस जो हैं ये फुली एयर कंडीशन है, प्लस इसमें हीटर भी लगे हुए हैं। इसके अलावा वाईफाई की सहूलत भी अवेलेबल है और चार्जिंग पोर्ट भी आपके लिए अवेलेबल है बसेस में।
I was harassed by this taxi driver. You feel safe when you think that you are every time protected and cameras watching you.
प्रीवियस ट्रांसपोर्ट सिस्टम्स में ये इम्पॉसिबल था हमारे लिए उसको ऑपरेट करना, क्योंकि उसमें तो व्हीलचेयर का सवाल ही पैदा नहीं होता था कि आप व्हीलचेयर के साथ उसमें चढ़ सकते थे। तो जहाँ तक BRT की बात है, क्रॉस डिसेबिलिटी के लिए यूनिवर्सली एक्सेसिबल है। हम इसमें बगैर किसी के मदद लिए हुए हम इसमें रोज़ाना सफ़र कर सकते हैं।
Nowadays, if you ask anybody in Peshawar, and the Peshawar BRT is something they will be very proud of talking about it. It creates a lot of quality food passes. It has new energy efficient street lights. It provides much clean passenger vehicles, and it generates a much nicer environment. In terms of urban mobility, the system encourages people from all walks of the life to use the public transport, and it's really changing and transforming the city.
So so I hope you've been able to see all the various dimensions of this project. So we are really supporting our developing member country clients to aim for excellence. And this project is a good example. It has received international recognition. It's a bus rapid transit system that is gold standard. And we know that the Turkish contractor and consulting firm have experience in this field. So looking at other region, so you can see this is now South Asia. So public transport, rail is really, really strong, particularly in India when we have this mega size project. So we have another video that we'd like to play. So this time it's the commuter rail project in the national capital region. So it's on the next slide. And so you will see another example of a kind of project ADB is supporting these days.
The National Capital Region, or NCR, is the largest urban agglomeration in India and centered around India's capital city, New Delhi, and encompasses several surrounding districts. With a total population of more than 46 million that is spread over an area of over 58,000 square kilometers, NCR generates nearly 8% of India's GDP. However, most of the socio-economic development of NCR has been centered around Delhi, which accounts for 37% of the total population of NCR, while covering less than 5% of the NCR area. With Delhi projected to be the most populous city in the world in 2028, there will be tremendous pressure on its infrastructure that will cost 12% of Delhi's GDP in terms of air pollution, fatalities, wasted fuel, and reduced productivity. Thus, there is a need to shift to polycentric developmental approach where surrounding parts within NCR are able to absorb this pressure from Delhi. The Functional Plan on Transport for NCR 2032 has identified 8 regional rapid transit systems, RRTS, corridors to connect the towns in NCR with high-speed rail-based commuter transit services. 3 regional rapid transit system corridors, Delhi Meerut, Delhi Alwar, and Delhi Panipat, will be developed under Phase 1, with Sarai Kale Khan as the common station. The first corridor connecting Delhi to Meerut will span a distance of 82 kilometers and have world-class transport infrastructure supporting average speeds of 100 kilometers per hour. It is expected to reduce the travel time from 3.5 hours to about 1 hour. Asian Development Bank will co-finance the capital expenditure and envisages a 3-pronged outcome from the project: commissioning the Delhi-Meerut RRTS corridor, strengthening the institutional capacity of NCRTC, improving mobility and economic opportunities for women and differently abled. ADB will provide finance plus support that will include building multimodal integrated station, technical assistance for exploring transit-oriented development, and selection of a shadow operator. The project will have well-lit and CCTV cameras, supervised coaches, and public areas in all stations, as well as patrolling by security guards to ensure safety of women. Further, mobility, visual, and hearing assistive aids will be provided to 1,000 differently abled persons. Overall, the project is expected to have a substantial demonstration effect and pave the way for integrated mobility and sustainable development of NCR.
Okay, so as you can see, those kind of mega-sized projects, and for those who are familiar with ADB and the kind of project we've been supporting in the last decade, so this kind of mega-sized project building our portfolio maybe starting 5 years ago. And if we go to the next slide, we will see that in Southeast Asia region, we have similar project. Next slide, please. I know it's East Asia. So East Asia, we have project in China and Mongolia. So similar areas of support with electric mobility project as well. Next slide. And we are now in the Pacific region. Of course, we have 2 main subsectors that are present more in that region than in others, which is maritime and aviation. In all of this region, we're still supporting road projects and trying to do things differently, looking at resilient infrastructure as well. So ADB is still financing both. Just because we've been focusing on the new kind of project doesn't mean that we are not continuing this, but is taking a smaller portion of our portfolio. Next slide. So the key takeaway in a nutshell, so there is an increased focus on climate, innovation, knowledge, integrated solution, and sustainability of assets. Again, road is still 50% of our portfolio, but railway and urban transport is scaling up, including this large project example that we have shown you, creating new opportunity for consulting firms with experience in this subsector and able to deliver on holistic and integrated approach and solution. There is also a strong and increased focus on enabling proper operation and maintenance and asset management. So again, if that is a kind of project you are able to support and deliver as consultant, supplier, or contractor, you definitely should be able to play a role. And our developing member countries would definitely want to see and receive your proposal and see you taking part in the competition. So I'll stop here. Happy to explain and answer a question at the end during the Q&A. And now turning it to the next speaker, maybe David for energy, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's right. Thanks. Thanks, Bertrand, for this presentation. I think the audience will come with the questions, and it's, I think, David's turn for energy sector. David?
Thank you, Hassan. It's a real pleasure to be here with the Turkish Contractors Association. Good morning to everyone. It's my pleasure to take you through ADB's energy policy and portfolio. So hopefully you can see my presentation. In terms of outline, I will be covering and giving an overview of the key energy challenges that we're seeing in Asia and the Pacific, but also looking at where we see opportunities and the changing energy landscape, and hopefully opportunities where we can work together to address these challenges and finance some of the opportunities. I'll take you through sort of the latest in terms of ADB's energy portfolio. And as highlighted, it has been challenging and times, but we are seeing growth again in the region, and we're hoping to materialize on those. I'll take you through the new ADB's energy portfolio. So possibly in the last meeting we had, you had not seen this. So there's a new energy policy with new ambitions and new objectives focusing particularly on renewable energy and energy efficiency. Then I'll give you some examples of ADB's clean energy projects in the last couple of years and an indication of the clean energy projects we're working in the next couple of years. So in terms of challenges, some of you might be familiar already. We still have significant challenges in terms of energy access. So we have roughly 350 million people that do not have adequate supply of electricity and energy, and 155 million people that do not have access to electricity. We have even a larger number of people that do not have access to clean cooking. So they're still using biomass, kerosene, or coal for cooking. And if we factor in COVID-19 and the recent energy crisis, there is an increasing number of people that cannot afford their energy services. So the number actually is going up rather than going down, which is very worrying. The second topic, which has now become a hot topic together with climate change, is energy security. And so in the region, we're seeing a doubling of electricity demand over the next 20 years or so, and a significant amount of investments that are required in terms of renewable energy, about $6 trillion by 2040, and electricity grid investments of $6.4 trillion by 2040. This is substantial. It cannot be met only by governments and by MDBs, multilateral development banks such as ourselves, and will require significant private sector investment. So here, again, huge opportunity to look at in the region. Another energy challenge is definitely a high dependence on fossil fuels. So 50% of global CO2 emissions from fossil fuels are coming from the Asia-Pacific region. We have approximately 25% of CO2 emissions from coal power generation. We're still seeing that increasing. So it's a huge challenge to tackle increasing electricity demand and increasing dependence on coal for both power as well as heating. In terms of opportunities and changing energy landscape, as you might be familiar, in terms of energy landscape, we're seeing profound changings in terms of falling cost of renewable energy compared to conventional energy sources. We're seeing emerging new and innovative low carbon energy technologies as well. In terms of global commitments, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals, but also the Paris Agreement, the nationally determined contributions, and increased ambitions being set by countries, including net zero targets. And of course, ADB's commitment to becoming the Asia and Pacific Climate Bank. So we've raised our ambition in terms of providing climate finance by 2030 of on the order of 100 billion of cumulative climate finance, which is very substantial. And at least 75% of our operations supported climate action between 2019 and 2030. So it really shows a big focus of the bank on climate change as well as clean energy. In terms of our energy sector portfolio lending across the last 10 years, more or less, as mentioned, it's about 20% of the overall ADB lending. When we break that down in terms of energy subsectors, we see that about 50% in clean energy and 50% in transmission and distribution and others. We see a growing need, as you saw from the numbers, a growing need for upgrade and expansion of transmission and distribution, and that's likely to continue our main area of focus. And in terms of clean energy, substantial still investments required on renewable energy, and that's where we've been focusing. On energy efficiency, we're really wanting to do much more, and hopefully we can work with many of Turkish companies in this area, and there's been a lot of interesting work, expertise that we'd like to tap into. And also fuel switching, so particularly from coal to gas or even from fossil fuels to renewable energy, but that's much smaller area of investment at the moment. And as Bertrand mentioned, we cover a range of regions in Asia Pacific. So this graph is just to illustrate the energy sector portfolio and how it varies per region. The main regions of investment have traditionally been South Asia and Southeast Asia. For Central and West Asia, there's definitely some fluctuation. And of course, that very much depends on the government demand. Private sector operations, as you can see, again, fluctuated, severely impacted, of course, by COVID-19, but we're seeing, as I mentioned, increasing growth in private sector investment, particularly in renewable energy across the regions. So last year, we did about 1.7 billion energy sector lending. We typically do around 4 billion, but we're still slowly, sort of gradually recovering, but still last year was a challenging year for us. We did it across 19 energy projects. About 693 million was in climate finance, of which 659 million was in climate mitigation, so clean energy projects, and 34 million in climate adaptation. So it's an area, again, that we also want to do more, and looking at making energy infrastructure, particularly transmission and distribution, more climate resilient. Again, sort of a breakdown, as we saw, 50-50 almost in terms of energy efficiency and renewable energy last year. The thing that might be new to many of you, if you attended last year's session, is we have a new energy policy. The previous energy policy was from 2009, was relatively outdated. So we approved this one in October 2021. And the main priorities by far are energy efficiency, renewable energy, energy storage, decarbonization, as well as electricity transmission, distribution, expansion, and upgrade. Again, we continue to support governments in terms of their energy policy reforms, their long-term planning, their regional cooperation, particularly cross-border transmission, and also bringing in greater private sector participation. The policy promotes the use of smart digital innovation, innovative technologies, as well as a big focus on best available technologies. Again, a focus in many of these countries is to deliver an inclusive and resilient just transition. So we're transitioning countries from using coal and oil, particularly for transport, to using electric vehicles and using gas or cleaner energy sources, renewable energy, and so on. The policy, compared to 2009, it formally closes the door for coal financing, but we leave the door open for natural gas, subject to very strict criteria. And so it's very similar to other multilateral development banks that you work with, such as EBRD. We're selective on financing storage hydropower plants, but again, it's an area we're closely looking and keen to work together with Turkish firms. Again, we continue the practice of not financing nuclear energy. In terms of just going through a bit more detail in terms of our energy policy and the principles, we have 5 main principles. I'll go through in the next slide into more detail in principle 1, 2, and 3. But just to highlight, principle 1 is securing energy for a prosperous and inclusive Asia and the Pacific. The second one, building a sustainable and resilient energy future. The principle 3, supporting institutions, private sector participation, and good governance. And principle 4 and 5, promoting regional cooperation and integration, which is going to become increasingly important with increased electrification of the energy system and integrated cross-sector operations to maximize development impact. And this means working across energy, water, transport nexus. So if we go a bit into detail on principle 1, securing energy for a prosperous and inclusive Asia and the Pacific, again, we continue to support electrification programs in several countries where it's still an issue, and particularly to ensure there's 24/7 electricity, to promoting cleaner cooking, heating, and cooling. And this is a major priority in Central West regions, but we're seeing also in the cooling area, Southeast Asia and South Asia, increasing demand for that, and cleaner cooking in many and across the region. Improving energy efficiency across supply and consumption chains, and then promoting social inclusion, gender equality, and partnerships. When we look at principle 2, building a sustainable and resilient energy future, the big focus is on accelerating renewable energy, and we're covering a range of areas: solar, wind, and hydropower, but we're also seeing increasing hybrid solutions, battery integration, and even other solutions as well, such as geothermal. And this is, of course, geothermal, a big area of focus for Turkey, and again, very keen to work with Turkish firms in that area as well. We're looking at supporting strategic decarbonization. That's a major focus in these countries at the moment as they commit to net zero and more ambitious climate targets. Increasing resilience and efficiency of the electricity infrastructure. We're still seeing very much outdated infrastructure, transmission distribution lines across many countries. And as I mentioned, ensuring a just transition. In terms of principle 3, supporting institutions, private sector participation, and good governance, we're still looking at supporting institutions, building capacity and training. We're also looking at tariff and subsidy reform, and again, an area where Turkey can be a very interesting example of how they've addressed these issues through reform and unbundling. Private sector participation as well as a big focus, greater impact through sector-wide long-term planning. And so we're helping countries with their energy modeling and trying to integrate a number of their planning across sectors and what that means for energy. And then partnering to shape energy sector reform policy. So we're working with other multilateral development banks. In terms of examples of ADB's approved clean energy projects, just to give you an overview, we do a lot of financial intermediation loans, and so we've done so in rooftop solar in Sri Lanka, and we've done it through a 15 million credit line through the government to multiple local banks for financing rooftop solar PV systems. And of course, we've seen what's happened in Turkey in terms of the uptake of solar PV systems. So again, we're seeing a lot of interest in the markets, but because these tend to be small projects, we tend to do it through financial banks. But I again see a number of opportunities here for Turkish firms. We also provide concessional loans for energy efficiency in many countries, and this in India was quite a very large-scale project where we combined it with a 13 million grant, and we looked at setting up an energy efficiency revolving fund to finance LED streetlights, LED bulbs, ceiling fans, electric vehicles, and charging stations, and so on through energy service companies. We also provide private sector loans, and we've been quite active in several countries, particularly Central Asia at the moment. But this example here is on wind power in Thailand, which was our first project in the country to integrate both large-scale wind power generation with battery energy storage, and we provided long-term financing of $240 million. We also do sovereign project loans, and we're doing work in Mongolia, looking at a dedicated large-scale battery storage system to help decarbonize the system, to increase the uptake of renewable energy, but also to provide sort of our large energy reserve, load shifting capacity, and even emergency backup if required. Finally, we are providing grant support in many islands in the Pacific Island for renewable energy. In this case, we provided a grant for installing a floating solar system on a water reserve. We also set up several facilities. So this is for Southeast Asia, the ASEAN Catalytic Green Financing Facility, where we basically support ASEAN governments, Southeast Asian governments, with technical assistance and bringing co-financing for partners and help them identify and prepare commercially viable green infrastructure projects. And we did so in the first and largest solar wind farm in Cambodia to date with 100 megawatts. An area that might be of interest as well, we've just set up an energy transition mechanism together with the Philippines and the government and Indonesian government. And this is basically a scalable and collaborative initiative that we're partnering to find a market-based approach to accelerate the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. And we are doing so by retiring coal power assets earlier than scheduled, and trying to use funding as well to build the necessary renewable energy capacity to replace those. So there's a number of advantages of doing so. So accelerate the climate action, but also reduce energy costs, drive investment. So trying to crowd in investment from philanthropy, from donors, and look at investments in scaling up clean energy technologies. And so we're sort of pilot testing this in Indonesia and Philippines, but we're seeing a growing interest from other countries as well. And there's more information online on the energy transition mechanism if you're interested. In terms of indicative clean energy projects we're looking at, this is just, again, an example. There's more detail on each of these on our website and the list of projects. But just to indicate areas that might be of interest, in Indonesia and Philippines is particular areas where we're working on geothermal energy. Indonesia, we have a geothermal power expansion project there. We also have been supporting also projects in terms of integrating electric buses and EV charging. In Mongolia, we're supporting renewable energy development, but also smart grid integration. And so this is an area where we've been quite active in Mongolia. In several of the islands, we have been looking at renewable energy development, but also expansion and upgrade of their transmission distribution systems, including hydropower projects. In Bangladesh, we are also supporting very early stage renewable energy projects. We are now working also with the government in Cambodia to implement a number of energy efficiency projects in buildings, but also LED street lighting. We have a sort of utility scale 20 megawatts renewable energy project in Bhutan. This would be the first time Bhutan will be looking at a utility scale solar project, and hopefully that will trigger much more investment in the future. We're also looking at hydropower rehabilitation, and I know this is an area that Turkey is looking at very closely as well in their country, in your country, and we're looking at this especially in several other countries, and we see a significant opportunity to rehabilitate hydropower stations that have been built 30, 40 years ago. And then we have some projects, particularly in China, which cover a number of areas, focusing on low carbon transformation in urban areas and so on. So again, this is just a glimpse of some of the work that we are doing. And with that, that's my last slide. Thank you for your attention. Look forward to the discussions. Pass back to Hassan. Thank you.
We thank you, David, for this comprehensive presentation. I think it's going to be Mukta who is going to follow me, and then Didier as the last presentation. And I will, before offering floor to Mukta, I will kindly ask you to watch your time, because we are a little bit behind our proposed timeline. So please, Mukta, it's yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure actually to be back amongst all of you. We earlier met in 2020, and I am actually representing ADB's Office of Public-Private Partnership.
Yeah, we have the competitive edge. Thank you.
Yeah. So through my presentation, I'll be actually covering 3 key areas, and I'll try to be precise and finish up quickly. The first being the introduction of Office of PPP, we actually call it OPPP, and how our office is actually supporting ADB's target member countries to prepare bankable infrastructure projects in Asia Pacific. And secondly, I'll be discussing about few immediate PPP opportunities in Central West Asia region and other regions across Asia, with focus on sectors where we know that unique and demonstrated experience of Turkish private sector players can be of immense benefit to our target member countries. So next slide, please. Next slide. So beginning with introduction of OPPP, as few of my colleagues mentioned earlier, there has been an increasing emphasis on private sector investments and public-private partnership towards 2030 within ADB, and it will play a much larger role in mobilizing and catalyzing private resources for infrastructure development. Office of PPP, since the beginning of its operation from January 2015, has been an active partner of developing member countries in promoting PPPs. There are few barriers in promoting PPPs, like weak capacity and commitment, underdeveloped enabling environment, poor project preparation, insufficient project financing. And ADB's PPP strategy is based on a 4-pillar approach, as you can see in the presentation, which supports each member country in overcoming its own particular challenges. The Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 are customized to support upstream and policy level improvement. Pillar 1, through knowledge dissemination and training, helps in capacity development of the executing agencies, while Pillar 2 supports development of enabling environment by providing legal support and technical assistance. Pillar 3 and Pillar 4 focus on providing specific project preparation support for including preparation and financing. So Pillar 3 provides support throughout the process, from structuring to bid management to commercial or financial close, while Pillar 4 is a support for financing of the projects by providing non-sovereign and sovereign financing and guarantees. Office of PPPs has 2 major ways to provide support through these pillars. The first is providing pre-funding through Asia Project Preparation Facility, and second, through providing transaction advisory services. Now, talking about the first one, Asia Project Preparation Facility is a $73 million fund, which contributions from 3 financing partners, Japan, Australia, and Canada. It's actually managed exclusively by ADB on behalf of donors and provides technical assistance to pre-fund initial capacity building and project preparation activities required to develop well-structured PPP projects. Another important element for long-term sustenance of the PPP project is to monitor them post-award, and thus taking cognizance of the same, AP3F facility also provides project monitoring support. Moving on to the transaction advisory services, OPPP provides advisory services throughout the value chain of the project, beginning from project preparation and structuring activities to marketing of the project to international investors, to supporting the government in running the tender process, to all the way to achievement of commercial close. And in certain transactions, depending upon the specific requirements, we do support till achievement of financial close as well. In most of the transactions, OPPP does combine the support of transaction advisory and the TA facility for its clients. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, the next 3 slides do provide a flavor of our spread of operations specifically, and this slide shows the transactions which have been closed by OPPP. So we have actually supported closure of several transaction advisory mandates across countries. And OPPP has been able to commercially close out 13 projects since 2015. And the Asia Pacific Project Preparation Facility has supported more than 15 applications for capacity building, project definition, project preparation across entire Asia Pacific. Next slide, please. In terms of transactions which have been closed, as you can see, these actually span across multiple sectors: energy, including solar, water and wastewater, transport, urban infrastructure, and ranging from Southeast Asia to South Asia to Central West Asia. Next slide. Now, AP3F has actually approved around $53 million worth of support. And again, in terms of ongoing support of AP3F, this span across all the key regions of the Asia Pacific, ranging from Vietnam, Philippines in the east, to Maldives and Bangladesh in the South Asia, to Pakistan, Tajikistan, Georgia, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan in Central West Asia. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to the second part of the presentation, I would be actually talking about 3 ongoing projects in Uzbekistan, 1 project each in Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Philippines, and China. And you could observe that few of the opportunities have actually made significant progress since we last connected in 2020. Now, talking about this first opportunity is in solar sector in Uzbekistan. ADB is working with Ministry of Energy to develop 1 gigawatt of the solar PV program. And we are the sole transaction advisor for the entire 1 gigawatt program, and will be supporting government till the financial close. The first project under this program is located near the city of Sherabad in southern region of Uzbekistan. And the scope of the project is to develop 457 megawatt solar PV plants through integrated PPP modality from design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. The project actually achieved commercial close in August 2021 and is expected to achieve financial close in first half of 2023. After the successful closure of the first project, currently the second project is in the tender stage. This project is proposed to be of 300 megawatt solar PV plant in Guzar. An important point here is that this project is proposed to be based on the same templates of the tender documents and PPP agreement, which were used for Sherabad project, which have proven commercial viability and has already attracted sufficient private sector interest in the first project. Currently, ADB is in advanced stages of preparing the RFP documentation, and it is due to be launched soon. Regarding this next set of projects, the sites are currently being selected, and they will be expected to be in the tender in 2023. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about wastewater treatment plants in Pakistan. The government of the province of Sindh and Karachi and Water and Sewerage Board has approved a program to develop several wastewater treatment plant projects in PPP modality in Karachi in order to alleviate water shortage in the city. The private sector will undertake design and construction of the project and sell the treated water for industrial and agricultural use to consumers for a period of 25 to 30 years. OPPP is the sole transaction advisor for both the projects, for two projects. The first one, TP4, will be a solicited bid where ADB will be providing transaction advisory services, including project preparation support. While for the other one, TP1, the board has received an unsolicited proposal and ADB is advising on the structuring and competitive tendering of the project. So this project is actually expected to have the RFQ coming to the market during Q4, during the ongoing quarter of 2022. Next slide, please. Moving on to the healthcare project in Kazakhstan, it's Karaganda University Hospital. This hospital is located in Karaganda, which is around 200 kilometers south of capital city. The scope of the project is to develop 300-bed hospital through DBFOM modality, which is design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. And the payment mechanism proposed for the private partner is availability payments, thus taking away the market risk from the private partner. Again, OPPP is the transaction advisor to the government of Kazakhstan. ADB had been working on the legislative support to the government of Kazakhstan in introducing the infrastructure PPP model, which have been now approved. And currently, ADB is updating the project documentation. And once the government approval of these documentation is obtained, again, you would like to note that the tender process would be launched in Q4 2022. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to the railway sector opportunity in Philippines, these are the two railway projects, one being North-South Commuter Railway, a 147-kilometer line suburban rail network connecting New Clark City to the south of Luzon, and the other being the Metro Manila Subway Project, a 30-kilometer in Metro Manila, and is the first mass underground transport system in the country. The projects are being implemented as hybrid PPPs, where the construction is funded by the government with loans from ADB and JICA, while the operations and maintenance is being tendered to the private sector through long-term concession agreements. The projects are also supported by availability payments and thus mitigating the traffic risk for the operator. Currently, the project documentation is under approval by the government, and once approved, the tender process is expected to be launched in the first half of 2023. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the schools PPP project in Tashkent. This project comprises of 13 public schools covering grades 1 to 11, spread across a couple of districts in Tashkent. The scope of the project is to develop these schools on the basis of DBFM, which we call design, build, finance, and maintain. And in this case, the operations of these public schools would remain with the public sector, which means the delivery of education would be responsibility of the ministry. Technical pre-feasibility study has already been completed, and currently the Ministry of Public Education is in the process of obtaining approval from the cabinet. We expect the tender process to commence in Q1 of next year. Next slide, please. Talking about the elderly care PPP project in People's Republic of China. This elderly care facility is in the city of Yichang in Hubei province. In this case, the government will construct an elderly care facility, which will include a medical complex as well as a community complex, while the operations and maintenance is being tendered out to the private sector, and the private sector will be responsible for designing the fit outs, undertaking operation and maintenance, providing the furniture, and operating the internal clinic for basic medical care. One unique feature of this project is that it is supported by ADB sovereign loan through East Asia Regional Department to finance approximately 50% of the capex. Currently, the project is under the RFQ stage, and do note the date of submission is 26th October 2022. Next slide. Last but not the least, the preschool project in Uzbekistan, which is under pipeline. So ADB will be supporting Ministry of Preschool Education to develop up to 100 preschools across the country on the basis of PPP. Here too, the program includes design, build, finance, and maintenance of preschools, while the provision of education services is still being discussed whether it will be provided to public partner or the private partner. The final project scope will be defined subsequent to the project scoping exercise, and which is expected to be beginning shortly. Next slide. So that's all from me, and happy to take questions after the seminar. Thank you.
Thanks. Once again, after a bit of time, with your concentration on the PPP projects, where we have really as a competitive edge. Now, with your permission, I will kindly ask Didier for the floor for his presentation. Though your friend Didier left you limited time, so please, the floor is yours. But
screen.
Yeah.
I will share my screen, and this is right. So this is the last part of this presentation. So perhaps, my name is Didier Guinet. So I am working with the Procurement, Portfolio, and Financial Management Department. So I will present the portfolio, the procurement framework, and I will also take you and walk you through the way how to find opportunities in a practical manner. And my colleagues introduced, I would say, the very interesting insight on the transport, energy, and PPP. And I will take you and walk you through how to navigate in our website to find, I would say, opportunity on time. This is very important. So perhaps I will move a little forward because my colleagues already addressed some of these notions. A few words. So why pursue ADB-funded projects? But perhaps the most important reason is that ADB funding provides some security for you, because so we know that the contract will be funded. This is one reason. Another reason is that, of course, our region, so the Asia and the Pacific, is a fast growing region in the world. And as my colleague explained, we finance, I would say, operation in various departments, in various sectors. I must say that also our operations are rapidly growing. When I joined the bank in 2017, 5 years ago, I think we were doing something like 17, 18 billion dollar of commitment per year. So now we've passed 20 billion in 2021. So quite significant increase. And naturally also as a multilateral development bank, we rely and we use accepted and fair and transparent procurement procedures. So I think it's a guarantee also that there will be no mishandling of procedures, and I think it's very important. And we do, in fact, would say, implement some strong oversight by ADB, and this is precisely the purpose of the department I work with, so the portfolio and procurement department. So now, where could you be involved, I would say, in our project? So this shows here this wheel, so to speak. So the project cycle life, so it goes from the definition of a country partnership with our country members, and this is then this is decline, or this is explained more in the country operation business plan, business partnership, COBP. Then projects are being prepared starting from the concept level. There's a preparation stage. based on feasibility studies and technical assistance. Then project move to the approval stage by our board, and then naturally we go into the implementation, and then post-implementation to the evaluation phase. So this is, so to speak, the project cycle life. So actually in every step or most steps of this cycle, the private sector, I would say, is welcome to participate. We do recruit ADB directly as a client, some individual consultant or some firm in the early stage of the preparation process, possibly to set up the country, to assist in setting up the country partnership strategy or the country operational business plan. We also use employ consultant at the conceptual phase. We also use on technical assistance, what we call TF funds, consulting individuals or firms to assist in the preparation of the project. And once the projects are approved by our board, naturally, for the implementation phase, naturally, consultant and suppliers and contractors are employed by our borrowers and under ADB funding. We again employ some consulting firm or individuals in the evaluation phase. So as you see, we rely, I would say, largely on private, I would say, partners, consultant, either individual or consulting firm or suppliers or contractors and consultant. So very classically, I would say the kind of opportunity you may find with our project are either on the supply of goods, civil works, so typically for the transport sector, for the power energy sector. There is the kind of opportunity consists also in consulting services. So as I commented, this can concern the early stage of the project or the preparation of the project. It can also concern the implementation phase of the project. Typically, for instance, there are engineering design, there are construction supervision services, which typically are used for infrastructure projects. We employ consultant, or our borrowers also employ consultant for policy advisory, I would say, studies. And also, we do employ staff consultant on our budget, which will bring some expertise to, say, add expertise to our own team. So this is another category of employment for consultant, individual consultant, mostly. And last category of, I would say, business that you could be involved in it for what we call non-consulting services. So it could be a range of services such as surveys or event management or translation. So this is a kind of opportunity that you may wish to find on ADB funded project. Just a few comments on this slide because it is very important. Except on the consultant that ADB employ directly. And these are staff consultants, as I mentioned. These are also consultant, individual firm or firms that we use for project preparation. And for this type of employment, ADB will be your client. But apart from this specific type of task for consultant, either individual firms, the typical approach of ADB is that we provide oversight to our borrowers, but it is the borrower and what we call the executing agency or implementation agency, which will employ either suppliers, contractors, or consultant, and ADB, in fact, will provide oversight for procurement. So there are two kinds of, I would say, consultancy, two kinds of approach. Either ADB is a client, and usually we fund this type of employment or assignment on what we call TA or technical assistance funds. And for the rest, in particular for the implementation, it will be our borrower, which will be the client and which will recruit and ADB oversight, so their own consultant, suppliers, or contractors. Right, so a few words, and I have also an eye on my watch because I see that the time is moving, on the procurement framework. So we did a reform, a landmark reform in 2017, in which we revisited the way how we supervise, or the way how we define, I would say, procurement. Formerly, we used to have, on the one hand, for consulting services, guidelines on the use of consultants, and we used to have procurement guidelines. So we revisited our approach to procurement, and in this aspect, we did it, I would say, in line with other MDBs, like the World Bank. We did not completely reinvent procurement, but we, however, changed the approach, and we moved from a rule-based procurement rather to a principles-based procurement. So we tended to be less prescriptive, and so, as I said, principle-based, and the aim of which would be to improve, to speed up, and to provide more value for money. So now we have two main documents which define, and which we can find on our website, which define, I would say, the procurement framework. The procurement policy, which is a high-level document. I think it's a 13-page document, which defines at the high level our policy. And this document is more, I would say, specified through the procurement regulations for ADB borrowers. So it's where we expand, I would say, our policy. So among the various changes we introduced in 2017, so we had core procurement values. So traditionally, they were fairness and transparency. This is a typical value of the public procurement policy. We have also the value of economy and efficiency. So efficiency consisting in ensuring that we use procurement process which were proportional to the risk and value of projects, and economy, seeing that we use either price or non-price attributes to perform procurement. And we added two more values, which is quality. So we put an emphasis now on precisely the quality to achieve, I would say, better development outcomes in a more effective manner, and value for money. So value for money, it's a very important driver. We want to make sure that our borrowers use procurement strategies which will provide the most value for money. So the aim of this reform was to improve, I would say, quality, generally speaking, to achieve greater value for money. We also are very keen on reducing the procurement time, end-to-end procurement time, very important. We wish to attract, and we hope to attract, better quality supplier to bid for a project. We hope to lower transaction to lower the cost for transaction. And besides, we also work on strengthening capacity for our developing member countries in the field of procurement. Well, and also a very important, I would say, pillar of our activity and procurement is the anti-corruption policy and guidelines. We have naturally zero tolerance for corruption or fraudulent practice, and we have a strict policy of integrity and integrity principle and guidelines. We see to it that naturally bank staff and all our partners, our borrowers, all consultants, suppliers, contractors behave with the highest ethical standard, we have a strict debarment rule in case we can assess that any consultant, supplier, contractors would infringe this principle. In a few words, consulting services, as I said. So as I said, there are several categories of consulting services. For individual consultant, we do employ some staff consultants. So any individual consultant from our DMC, so in particular from Turkey, would be eligible to become a staff consultant. This staff consultant will be paid by ADB on their human resources budget and will strengthen our team. Well, this is one perhaps narrow source of services, but I just mentioned it because it's one possible type of opportunity. For the rest, we, as I mentioned also before, the individual consultant or firms can be used either by ADB under technical assistance TA funds, in which case ADB will be the client, and that will be typically the case for services aiming at preparing our project, or naturally, individual consultant and firm may be also implied on loan or grants, so by our borrowers or grant recipient to implement the project. And there are two categories of, I would say, consultant services. It could be national or international. So we consider that a national consultant will be a consultant which will be for a firm incorporated in the country, in the DMC, developing countries. For individual person, it will be a national consultant will be a person who is either a national or perhaps, if not national, having a residency status and legally residing in the country, or it could be an international consultant, either individual or firm. And in that case, what we would be looking for is that a consultant having an experience, a wide experience internationally wise. So the typical sequence for the selection of the recruitment of a firm, a consulting firm, the sequence is somehow classical. So it goes through the following steps. First, either ADB, if ADB is a client, or our client or our borrower, if there's a client, will spell out detailed terms of reference and assess a budget for the services. Then there will be an advertisement. So I will comment on how this opportunity are advertised. There will be typically a shortlisting. Formerly, we used to consider that there should be 6 shortlisted firms for every assignment. Now we are more flexible. It could be less, or it could be more than 6. But the point is to have I would say, a reasonable number of shortlisted firms. So the firms are selected for being shortlisted on the basis of an expression of interest, and there is an assessment of the expression of interest, and usually so the 6, sometimes 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 8 best expression of interest are so give rise to a short list, and this shortlist, then the shortlisted firms then are invited to submit a tender, to submit a proposal. Well, then there will be an evaluation phase, usually a technical evaluation phase and a financial evaluation phase, and the best ranked firm will be invited to negotiation, and thereafter contract will be signed. So this is as a classical stage for recruiting a consulting firm. And your procurement framework, we have 6 methods to select and to recruit firms. So the most common one is called QCBS, so quality and cost based selection. It means that the proposal which the shortlisted firm will submit will be evaluated on the merit of a technical proposal, and there will be a technical ranking. There will be then the firm which will pass a minimum ranking, technically speaking, will have the financial proposal opened. There will be an assessment of the financial proposal, and there will be a combination of the technical score and financial score. So this is what we call QCBS. It's somehow the default solution, the default approach for recruiting a firm. Now there are other systems. In some cases, depending on the type of assignment, and depending on the risk, depending on how specific and how specified can be spell out the TORs, the terms of reference. We could resort to quality-based selection, where quality will be, so not quality and cost, but only quality will be the driver and the sole criteria for selection. We have another method called consultant qualification selection, which is based basically on amplified expression of interest, and there will be a selection from this amplified expression of interest of a consultant based on the assessment of his qualification, and there will be a negotiation for then on the financial proposal. And there are also three other methods: fixed budget selection, where in that case there is a fixed amount of the price of the services which will be determined in the request for proposal. And so the consultant will be invited to submit a technical proposal which will fit financially in the given envelope. So it means that no price proposal can be accepted beyond the fixed limit. Another method is a least cost selection. So typically for services which are quite standard, could be, for instance, audit services, it could be translation services, for instance. In that case, there will be an assessment of the qualification of the applicant, the firms, and the one which will be selected. Once those who do not qualify are set aside, the one which will be selected will be the one having the least cost financial proposal. And I also mentioned the last method, direct contracting. So usually this is something which is not, I would say, providing perhaps the best value for money, but in some cases we may accept to recruit with no competition, depending on certain circumstances. Emergency could be a consideration. The specific expertise or a specific firm could be another consideration. And in that case, we would, our borrower or ourselves, depending on who is the client, will contact and negotiate directly with one specific firm. One typical example whereby we would accept direct contracting, although it somehow would say, I would say, an exception to the open competitive bidding principle. But it's a case, for instance, where a consulting firm has made some service and some other service, perhaps the extension of the first service, are being sought, and it is deemed to be more efficient, to be more economic, to provide more value for money, to entrust the continuation of the previous services to the incumbent firms. So these are the various methods which you may encounter when applying for consulting services. Right, so some consideration to prepare, I would say, as a consultant, your expression of interest or your proposals. But naturally, you should try to identify proper entry points. So in fact, I will guide you through our website to explain how you can look for proper opportunities. It's also, I would say, advisable if you may have some contacts to understand the projects, to understand the ins and outs, to understand the expectations. So the most information you can gather in the project, the better will be, the better prepared you will be. Naturally, so you should understand the context, the background, and what my colleague Rustam Abdukoyamov, it's perhaps to identify relevant partners. And from Turkey, if you wish to apply for consultancy services in any other ADB, DMC, developing member countries, you should probably identify local partners with whom you could team up to have, I would say, your firm would bring the expertise, the international expertise from Turkey, and would rely on perhaps a local partner who can guide you, I would say, for either for the preparation of the proposal itself and naturally for the implementation. And naturally, you may also want to find international partners so as to gather and to build up the most relevant pool of expertise. Very important also is also some due diligence which should be made before preparing a financial proposal on the cost of doing business, and in particular in the tax framework. Very important to understand how you will be taxed in country, whether your expert will be taxed or not at the personal level, and how your firm will be taxed for conducting the country. So there may be a number of setups. You might consider setting up a permanent establishment to be a tax resident in some cases. In some cases, perhaps you will not need to establish such framework, but it's very important that you conduct a due diligence, and particular in terms of tax. And for this, you may rely perhaps on some specialized tax consultant. Usually, law firms have usually some relevant and strong tax departments, so you may consider using such a kind of services. Right, and naturally, do not hesitate to raise questions, and in particular, when if your firm is shortlisted and if you're invited to participate to tender, to a bidding process, you may ask question, and there's usually a certain time frame during which any participating firm may raise any question to obtain clarification. And in that case, the client, so either ADB or one of our borrowers, will have to respond to all consultants to provide clarification. So that's very important, and you should not hesitate to ask as many questions as you may deem relevant. Right, so similar tips for goods and works. Well, there are different methods which are used. So the most common method is the open competitive bidding. So this reflects the principle of transparency and fairness, or the principle of fairness that we naturally promote. There are other modes, depending on circumstance, where our borrower may use different kind of procurement methods. One is limited competitive bidding. In the case where a limited pool of either supplier or contractors are considered to be perhaps the most relevant or the only relevant. For the supply of goods, in particular when the amount is limited, our borrower may use a request for quotation, meaning consulting several suppliers and comparing the quotation submitted. Again, in some cases, we could have direct contracting, but direct contracting is generally speaking against the fairness principle. So we consider that it's a possible approach for procurement, but only on specific cases, very specific cases. We have also other systems such as electronic reverse auction when electronic procurement is used, and there are also other specific or specialized methods like framework agreements.
Okay.
Right. So a few tips not to, I would say, to avoid that your bid could be set aside or disqualified. Some do's and don'ts, so to speak. So be aware that of some common mistake. A bid which is not signed, or a letter of bid is not signed, or it's if the bid is signed by the person who has not the proper power of attorney, is a bid which will be rejected. If you fail to submit a bid security or bid security declaration as applicable, will be also immediately rejected. It will not be considered for evaluation. Some other deficiency may be corrected. Usually the bidding document provide that some I would say clarification or amendments could be brought if the bid is the bid security is not of the proper amount or not the proper validity. So this might be corrected, but the absence of a bid security is not something which can be corrected, and which will lead the absence of a bid security or bid security declaration will lead to rejection. Naturally, of course, another cause of possible rejection is a lack of supporting document. So in the case of a JV, of a joint venture, the failure to submit the JV agreement, the failure to submit your financial audited statement, incomplete bids, partial bids, which do not fully meet the technical requirement, absence of performance certificate, as the case may be, or as a case of document which will certify your past references, conflict of interest which will not disclosed. If in the case of a two envelope system, in other words, in a situation where the technical bid is supposed to be distinct and separated from the financial bid, if you don't respect this requirement, typically in the case of a one-stage two envelope system, if you mixed the envelope and submit the price bid together with the technical bid, this could be a cause for rejection if a one-stage two envelope system has been prescribed. So some omissions can be corrected, but some others are cause for rejection. So we naturally invite you to read carefully the instruction to bidders. Right. What is also important is that we have, ADB has a complaint management system. First, in case you don't win a bid, if you consider that your offer, your proposal, your bid has not been, I would say, treated properly, or if you wonder how you could improve your bid for perhaps the next opportunity, you may ask for a debriefing, and debriefing will have to be, in fact, provided to you. It's an excellent learning opportunity. Debriefing may be asked not necessarily because of a complaint or because I would say a grievance or a dispute, but you may wish to understand why, for instance, I'm thinking of a consultant recruitment, why your proposal was not ranked the best. And myself, several times I have faced some debriefing with some firms which were very keen to understand why their proposal was, what was a weakness and how they could improve for future. This is an excellent opportunity to improve future, I would say, submissions. However, you may have a complaint, and then we have a system to file complaint. Complaint may be addressed to our borrowers, or perhaps may be addressed to ADB. But we do have a system online where you could submit your complaint, and there will be a response which will be given to your complaint. And if you consider that your bid has not been evaluated properly, but you may explain the grounds, and you may and you will receive an answer from ADB or from the borrower. And this being said, any allegation of fraud or fraudulent practice or corrupt practice should be reported separately to our Office of Integrity and Anti-Corruption. And we also have a specific website, a specific, I would say, tab on our website to report this kind of complaint, which are treated separately. And as I said, we have a anti-corruption guidelines and a zero tolerance policy. So we have a department within ADB which will deal separately and specifically with this kind of complaint, the department of the Office of Anti-Corruption and Integrity. Well, so the last slide before, because it's, I have also an eye on my watch. I will walk you through rapidly on our website to explain how you can find the proper information. That's key to I would say to win. I would say a contract is to have the proper information at the proper time. So information should be searched from, I would say, different level. From the most strategic level, you may want to find information and to understand what are the strategies that ADB have agreed with its member countries. And typically we have a country partnership strategy which are discussed and agreed. It's a 5-year plan which is discussed at a high level with our borrowers, with our member countries. And this, in fact, each country partnership strategy, which is a high-level strategy which is discussed between the bank and the countries, they are explained and detailed and refined in the country operation business plan, the COBP. That's very important because perhaps the high-level country partnership strategy will not give you much insight on a specific project, but the COBP, so the country operation business plan, will in fact refine and detail this country partnership strategy into specific project. And then on a more operational level, then for every project, you may consult what is called the procurement plan. It's a key document. It's a key document which will show you, which will in fact spell out all procurement packages, whether works, goods, services, which will give I would say an economic assessment, an estimated amount of each package, which will give you the method, the procurement method which will be used, and it will give you the time frame when it will be advertised. So it's a key document for you, and when you have identified a project which you feel you could provide either services, goods, or works, then do find the procurement plan. I will show you how, and to find which specific procurement, which specific package you can apply for, on which date, for which amount, and based on which procurement methods. So the type of document you will have to consult will be the advance procurement notice, advance contracting notice, which will precede the issuance of the actual either invitation for bid or invitation for pre-qualification. And naturally, this is the key. This is also a key stage for, let's say, preparing a bid. Is of course to be alert and to respond, to timely respond to invitation for bid or invitation for pre-qualification. For consulting services, we call it the consulting services recruitment notice. So it's a notice which will call for expression of interest. So this is the first stage, and naturally, you must absolutely submit an expression of interest to be hopefully shortlisted and then invited to submit a proposal. Right, and naturally, you may another strategy could be what is called open opportunities, meaning that you may team with other partners, with other consultants or suppliers or contractors, and be part of, I would say, as either subcontractor or sub-consultant, or perhaps as a joint venture partner with some other firm which will take the lead for preparing the bid. Right, and the last bullet point is for the institutional procurement that ADB does, so for its own internal use. Typically, it could be some procurement of, would say, corporate items, could be furniture, could be whichever services which may need it for the running of ADB itself. So this is a snapshot of our website. So first level, as I said, you should go and navigate through the Where We Work tab. Then you will find, I would say, the high level, the strategy, the high level strategy, country partnership strategy, which are discussed with our partners, which are developing member countries. So they are a 5-year plan, as I mentioned. And this is refined in 3-year plan called the country operation business plan. So perhaps the country partnership strategy will not provide you much insight for a given project, but you may go to the country operation business plan and you will see the list of projects which will be addressed in the coming years. So this is a very, very interesting and important source of information. So you will see on consulting this tab strategy. But typically, for instance, an extract from a COBP, so the country operation business plan, you will see the list of projects which have been discussed and agreed with the recipient country. So you will have it, well, not only the project by designation, but you will have also a time frame. You will have also some assessment of the funding. So naturally, it will be closely related to the project amount themselves. Now, when you have identified potential opportunities, then you may refine your search and going for project and tenders. This will give you, it's a menu, would say, that you can select by country, by type of, would say, you may search for a number of documents. As I mentioned, quite a crucial and key document is a procurement plan. So this will generate, for instance, if you select a specific country, and for the procurement plan, you will have a number of procurement plan which you can consult. And a procurement plan typically will give you, like, as I mentioned, all information for a given project. So all information on all the packages with the estimated value, the procurement methods, the bidding procedures, and the advertisement dates. And the advertisement date, a key information for you. So you will know when to expect and when to look for invitation for bid. And finally, the tender themselves, which of course you will have to answer, you will have to respond to. So then can be found on the same page. So you click the tab tenders. You may select, I would say, for a given country, for a given sector, and you will have all the invitation for bid for the upcoming invitation for bid. And this is, of course, where you can prepare yourself and start, I would say, preparing your partners, preparing your bid. So very important for us. And so this is a mine of information, and navigating through our website, you can find the information from the most strategic, I would say, level to the very, I would say, operation level, which may matter for you. Now, going for Yes, another also source of information. If you go into operational procurement on this tab, you will find the procurement plans, as I said, but all pre-qualified contractors, all contract awarded, all bidding procedures. So this, for instance, could be interesting if you wish to team with a pre-qualified contractor, or perhaps as a subcontractor, and the same for the contract awarded. If you decide not to place yourself as a bidder, you may consult also this source of information to find who are the pre-qualified contractors for future bidding or the contract awarded, and perhaps discuss opportunity for being subcontractor, subconsultant. Well, and now we have another system for consulting services called CMS, Consultant Management System. So you may register in it. You may register therein. This is the page where you will find in connecting to this system. So again, you may also navigate in this system to find the opportunities, and particular to find the so-called consulting, the CSRN, the Consulting Services Recruitment Notice, where you can express your interest. So you may also search through the systems by type of, I would say, consultant type, whether firm or individual consultant, by country, by project, and then looking into the right, I would say, consulting services opportunity and answering to an expression of interest. So this is typically what you will find if you select a specific call for expression of interest. So you will find, I would say, the key information, the duration of the expected duration, the budget, whether it is an estimated budget or a maximum budget, budget which is maximum cannot be exceeded. Any proposal beyond this budget maximum will be rejected. You may consult the terms of reference, the outline terms of reference. You may even consult perhaps the project officer who might give you some general information. So key information. And in both systems, whether under CMS or under the main ADB system, you may, if there's a system of alerts, so you may in fact use a subscriber, would say, service system, whereby you will receive alert on a certain number of opportunities, which you will define according to your field of interest. So as you see, there is a lot of information in our system. We live in a kind of glass houses. Everything could be found in our websites. So I do invite you to visit our website, either CMS for consultancy services, or the general ADB website for goods and works opportunities. All right, so thank you very much for your attention, and we'll be glad to take any question as you wish. Over to you. Perhaps I will stop sharing. Put some light.
I would like to thank you all the participants for these detailed presentations. I guess now it's time to pass to the Q&A session. The participants may convey their questions via raising their hands or writing their questions in the Q&A section. And there is one question we have from a participant. He says, sometimes the tender process in local currency longs nearly 1 year. as well as it's a well-known situation in these days, inflation rise month to month, and in connection with global economy, local currencies depreciates in this tender process. Are there any compensation system for currency depreciation or inflation, especially for construction tenders?
So let me perhaps repeat the question. If I understand, it's perhaps a consultant who has submitted, or contractor who has submitted a bid for a contract in local currency.
Yes, he says that especially if a tender is in a local currency and it takes time to end the tender process because of the inflation or changes in local currencies, the prices may get lower by the time. So is there any compensation system in ADB's procedures for the depreciation or inflation rates or the cost rise in the costs?
Unless you wish to respond, Rustam, I can offer perhaps a first comment. We do encourage our borrowers to provide, I would say, a cost escalation, an adjustment in cost mechanism, so that at least inflation will be compensated. And usually we have a guidance that over 18 months, all contracts should contain a cost adjustment mechanism. Actually, given the current market upheavals, we recommend our borrower to consider using this price adjustment mechanism even for less than 18 months. We are aware that the prices now are, they are very much, I would say, turmoil of the markets. We believe that perhaps the first answer would be to use this price adjustment mechanism, so that the risk, the inflation risk, will be actually transferred to the employer. In case, and sometimes we see some of our borrowers which are a bit reluctant to include such mechanism, we are aware that in case there is no such price mechanism provided for in the contract, we are aware that bidders might be discouraged. So in certain circumstances, we do encourage our bidder not only to provide it, I would say, beforehand, but even sometimes in certain circumstances, on a case-by-case basis, even after the contract is signed, we may consider in certain circumstances, and we have defined, I would say, internally, a number of, I would say, threshold, where we may accept that our borrower will amend the contract to include such a price adjustment mechanism.
But is it after this pandemic era also, do you consider to make it mandatory to include price adjustment clauses in the contracts?
It's not mandatory. We consider it advisable, and we do advocate strongly with our borrowers when we discuss procurement strategies that price adjustment mechanism should be given careful thought, because starting from the post-COVID crisis and compounded by the event in Ukraine, most commodity market has increased tremendously, whether cement, whether steel, whether bitumen, naturally oil, and this also impacted the currencies. So we do advocate, but it's not mandatory. We cannot say that ADB makes it mandatory. ADB does, we do advocate for a borrower. Perhaps Rustam, if you want to elaborate on what I said.
Yeah, thank you. I think you covered it.
The sound is very faint. Excuse me, Rustam.
Yeah, I think you covered this quite well, but maybe I would also like to emphasize that ADB and many other MDBs are normally using the FIDIC forms of contract, which are internationally recognized. And all these FIDIC form of contracts have a price adjustment formula. Right? Our traditional approach was to make a mandatory use of that if contracts are longer than 18 months. But even in those cases, it doesn't mean that the contractor has to wait for 18 months until to see they receive some compensation. Basically, it starts with the very first IPC, interim payment certificate. So it means prices could be adjusted based on certain indices, which bidders will be submitting at the time of bidding, and that will be done on a monthly basis. But as Didier also shared, we are now living in a very kind of unpredictable time period where the supply chain disruption and the price escalations are very common. And now we actually see many employers who were reluctant to use price adjustment formula. They're requesting us to use it for contracts with the shorter duration. So we have absolutely no problem with that. So, and as Didier said, during every project preparation, we discuss and say, okay, if you have a civil work contract, say for 12 months, so if you don't use the price escalation formula, it means there is a potential risk that the contractor reaches a point when continuing the work makes no sense. So they will be incurring more and more losses, even not break even, right? And if we take into account that the performance security amount is normally about 10% of the contract value, right? If at some point the contractor sees that because of price inflation, they cannot earn any profit, so they sometimes even are ready to terminate the contract because in that case, they may only lose the performance security of 10%, but if they continue, they may incur higher losses. So that's why it's a subject to kind of a discussion and agreement with the employers and what is the best in the given situation. But for all of us, for the next 1 or 2 years, it will be very difficult to predict inflation rate. So we are all saying, contractors, this is your own kind of risk. You have to assess what would be the currency fluctuation. And normally people would look at the 5 or 10 years historical period and do their own determination whether inflation will go up by 2% or by 3%. But now it is 10%, 15%, right? So past historical data doesn't help. So therefore, I think the tool that we could recommend is, of course, contractors do their own analysis based on whatever sources of information they have. But also when they see the bidding documents issued without price adjustment clauses, before submitting their bid, they could always raise this issue with the employer and say, this is a very uncertain situation. We would like to have a price adjustment clause in the contract. So this is how we are trying to deal with this issue now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rustam. And there is another question. How is the bank's approach to irrigation, financing irrigation projects?
Sorry, can you please repeat?
How is the ADB's approach to financing irrigation projects?
Irrigation is one of the sectors where ADB is actively involved. It may not be, say, the top 3, because top 3 are energy, transport, energy, and urban. Irrigation, if we're talking about agricultural irrigation, that would be number 4. But still, there are plenty of projects that ADB finances. Basically at different levels. Could be dam construction, small hydropower plants, could be irrigation canals, could be on-farm management. There are plenty of different approaches depending on what the governments want. And we have quite successful projects where we have seen significant water savings due to improved infrastructure, right? And also because there is more focus on renewable energies, small hydro becomes also one of the interesting areas. So for those who are interested to know about projects in the water sector, first, I think you have to decide in which part of Asia, because we have 5 regional departments. And then if you visit the webpage of that regional department on ADB website, you will see the list of projects in that particular region. And just basically you identify by the name what are projects in the water sector, because it will always have a word water. It's water management or water improvement or something like that.
Do you have a finance model for the PPP or build on operate type irrigation, agricultural irrigation projects?
I'm not aware of that. So far, I don't think, I mean, at least in our part in procurement, we have not come across that. But maybe, Mukta, if you know about that, you can chip in, because PPP is very dynamic. We didn't have
Sure.
anything 5 years ago. Now we have so many projects. So no wonder if there is some.
Right. So just taking a step back here. So when it is a PPP project, then there is a private sector developer who is in most of the cases looking for financing of the project. And when it comes to financing of a project through the private sector, then our private sector operations department comes into the picture. They are not there in the webinar today, but yes, our private sector operations department do have a separate division called agribusiness, and they do lend to projects in the agri sector. So and there is definitely a focus of the private sector as well to lend to these projects. But I would kind of leave it there. If there is any further information needed, I can connect the interested participant to the team of private sector department.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Didier, I also once again thank you very much for your detailed presentation on the procurement procedures. I guess the participants need time to digest all this information. So if you may let us, if there is any more rising questions on these procurement procedures, we will gather them and convey to you so that we will answer them after a while. Is it okay for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Mr. Erderal, would you like to add something to the discussions?
No, I just want to thank for all representatives of the ADB for their presentations. It was really very important what they have explained to us. I hope our members and the consultants will use much more the ADB's possibilities from now on. Thank you all.
I guess this is the end of our session for today. Thank you very much again for all the panelists and for their contributions. See you next time.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye.